If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, well, aging. What does it mean to be proactive versus reactive? Proactive means to take control of your life, work, relationships, finances, etc. Reactive means to take things as they happen. What does this mean for aging well? In this episode, we discuss the benefits of being proactive in our approach to aging and how we can become proactive to age well.
So I was thinking the other day that we get placed in a lot of different scenarios, as you know, especially when we're going through the process of aging well, or all aspects of life, really. And in those scenarios, sometimes we need to make that choice. Are we going to be proactive or are we going to be reactive based off of that? And I figured since every single person kind of deals with that same scenario of being placed in that mindset of, should I be proactive or am I simply being reactive? What a great subject for us to talk about.
Sounds good. I'm ready to react to whatever questions you have.
So what is the difference between proactive and reactive? Like, if you could summarize that in your own words.
I mean, I think there's a bit of a spectrum with that, and it depends on the situation. I mean, obviously, there's good times to be reactive and other times to be proactive. But I think when you're talking about being proactive, you are anticipating what can come forward. You are considering kind of your future and trying to prepare yourself for whatever may come in the future. Whereas reactive, you're just kind of sitting there waiting on things to happen, and you're making your decisions, you're creating your actions based in a response to whatever circumstances have suddenly popped up.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of looked it up and it said to be proactive means to take control of your life, your work, and your relationships. It means that you make things happen rather than waiting for things to happen to you. Being proactive is about controlling your destiny and taking responsibility for your success. On the other hand, being reactive means responding to events as they happen. You are constantly playing catch up and struggling to keep up with your life and work's demand. Reactive people often overwhelm themselves with stress because they constantly put out fires, then prevent them. And I figured, man, that sounds almost like aging well, right?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds a lot to me like our recent guests when we had David Kravitz and Larry Wolf on to talk about super aging. And we talked about default aging versus super aging. You know, I think
Right.
you could lump those into the category that default aging is essentially more reactive aging, whereas super aging is much more proactive aging. And we've talked on this podcast quite a bit about the process of aging well, starting from the point of conception. And that is, what we mean by aging well is being proactive and preparing ourselves for whatever aging might bring.
Exactly. So a couple categories that we can kind of dive into on how an individual can just kind of change that mindset and just become more proactive versus reactive is number one, stick to the basics, which is greater control. By being proactive, that means you're taking control of your life and work. This means that you are in charge of your destiny and you can direct the efforts towards achieving your goal. And I know we kind of talked about that in our podcast is, you got to take the excuses and you just got to throw them out the window. You may not full on do that sprint. It might start off a little rocky. You might have to do those baby steps in order to get in that direction, the direction that you want. But at the same time, you're being proactive. You have that goal in mind, and you're at least moving in the direction of that goal. Number 2 would be better time management. When you're proactive, you can better manage your time because you're not constantly putting out fires. You prioritize your task and work on the most important things first, making you more productive and efficient. Now, you as a college professor, how do you manage your time? Because I feel like you're constantly go, go, go.
Well, I still don't have enough time, but I think we've repeatedly talked about opportunity costs. And I know my students get tired of hearing that from me, but we know we have that 24-hour period in our day. And so we have to prioritize what is the most important things we have to do. And there are things that we don't have control over. And that's where being proactively reactive is a little bit more necessary. But when you take out, okay, we've talked about my regular sleep pattern, right? So I do have pretty much a bedtime and a time that I get up in the morning. It leaves me a rather small window to work out in the morning. I have no control really over that unless I get up earlier, which, lately I've been thinking I got to try and do because I'm not getting enough done in my workout. So I have to kind of take that as a priority and say, okay, well, I either have to get to bed a little bit earlier or give up on a little bit of sleep to be able to get this stuff done. But my commute is restricted. I mean, I can't do anything about my commute. So I lose about 2 hours a day, sometimes more in traffic, just driving to and from work. And then I have my work time, and I just try and use that time by prioritizing what do I need to get done for today. My class time is restricted, so it's not like I can manage that in my schedule. And then I have, presently I have the strength and conditioning afterwards, and I try and get the guys out of there as quick as possible. But I do have a few guys that really like to work out, and I don't want to, kind of dampen their enthusiasm by kicking them out early. So sometimes I'm there a little bit later. And I have a very regimented schedule. I come home, I usually walk the dogs, and then I sit down with my wife for a while, and it's usually dinner. And most likely by the time I get done with everything, it's bedtime already. So it's really having a schedule and kind of sticking to it. I know it sounds boring, but you can't quite live on the fly.
Yeah, I would agree. I always kind of have lived by the fly up until maybe the most couple recent years. I took a emerging manager course for my job, and through that we kind of learned about the Eisenhower matrix. Have you ever heard of that?
I have not.
It's basically, if you draw on a piece of paper, you draw just a cross, and so you have those 4 sections, and of those 4 sections, you're going to have important, urgent, important, not urgent, not important, urgent, not important, not urgent. And it's basically, if you have a giant to-do list or you have a massive task that you got to get done, but then, if you say you're at work or just daily life throws you curveballs, then you got to prioritize those things. Which of these are the most important at this moment? Which do I need to get done? Which is super time sensitive? And you just kind of go with that. And then whatever you don't get to in that day, well, now that moves to the top of your list for the next day. And it's kind of a good way to organize and kind of stay on top of whatever you need to get done.
I've always heard that attributed more to Stephen Covey. I think a challenge with that sometimes is, when you put things, you say, okay, well, I didn't get to it today. Well, was it even necessary to do in the first place? That may be something else to kind of consider. Because if you just keep putting it off, there's a sense of I'm not getting things accomplished because I keep pushing this thing off. And I can't remember the author now. And the kind of topic was a bit more of a productive procrastination. You're definitely putting off those things that are of much lesser importance. So some of that doesn't even necessarily even need to remain on the list. Or better yet, those things that you're not getting to that are of such low urgency and importance, once you've considered, is it necessary to actually do this? Is this something that needs to be done? If it needs to be done, does it have to be done by me, or can I push it off to somebody else? Because oftentimes, especially when we're in positions of leadership, we tend to try and take on everything. We want to keep control over everything. And a good manager, or even just a good productive individual, is going to pass on things that are of lesser priority for them to get done to somebody else who can make it a higher priority in their day. So if there's things that you're not getting done, why are you putting it off until the next day when there might be somebody at your work who is sitting around doing nothing? They're on Facebook or playing video games because they don't have anything to do. And I think a productive way of leading is to try and pass off as much as you can to those who are capable. And you're also in the process then of building the skill level for that individual. I don't know if that has anything necessarily to do with aging well, but certainly I think it has something to do with managing well.
Well,
I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
in a roundabout way, you're technically managing your life, right? You're managing your wellness, you're managing your health, your nutrition. You're just trying to say, you're just kind of taking control of it. You're being proactive and you're prioritizing things that are important and things that you need to take care of in order to age well. And again, aging well doesn't just have to be the physical aspect of it. It can also be the mental aspect. It could be the emotional aspect. It could be the financial aspect, all of which being proactive is going to allow you to have an extreme amount of success in any of those departments versus being reactive and just reacting simply off of whatever emotion that you're feeling at that time. Which kind of brings us to number 3. Being proactive equals more success. Being proactive is essential if you want to be successful. It means you are taking action to achieve your goals rather than just waiting for things to happen. When you are proactive, you are more likely to achieve your goals and fulfill your potential. Self-explanatory,
Yeah,
right?
pretty much a no-brainer there. I mean, take control and take action.
But I think in order to do that, I think it kind of goes back to goal setting, right? You really can't be proactive if you don't have a vision on which direction that you're going. You can't be proactive if you don't have that foresight of, okay, I need to get this done. And I think prioritizing either a goal or prioritizing your responsibilities or your duties, whether it's paying your bills or your finances, or whether it's going to the grocery store and staying away from the little the preservative sections and the candies and the junk food, and just making it a priority and being consciously aware of, nope, I'm just going to stick to vegetables. I'm going to stick to meats. I'm going to stick to things that are going to be healthy. And you make that proactive effort of just, you know what, this is my life now. And this is the decision that I've made. I think you got to find a goal and stick with it.
I don't know. It even necessarily has to be tied to goals, unless, of course, I guess you could say, health or diet are a goal. But, it's just kind of, again, prioritizing the things that are going to help you to age well. I don't know that I necessarily tie those with goals per se, but when it comes to eating a healthy diet, you might have goals in mind of weight loss or, weight gain or things like that. But when you prepare your meals, or at least have a meal plan in place, then you become much more proactive in regards to that component of your health. Having a meal that that's what I'm going to have for dinner tonight, so you can manage. You when you go to the grocery store, you're buying for those meals as opposed to just buying a bunch of food that may end up rotting or sitting in the freezer for ages and not ever being consumed. So, yeah, goal is probably a good part of it, but I would also say just in general, approaching life in a more proactive fashion is kind of even beyond just simply goals and what we're trying to accomplish in life.
Number 4, improve problem solving skills. When you're proactive, you can better anticipate problems and develop solutions before they occur. You're better equipped to handle challenges and obstacles, improving your problem solving skills. And I think this one is actually pretty interesting. And I think what the point is if you're placed in a situation where there's high levels of stress and you have to adapt and you have to adjust, if you're proactive and you've just become accustomed to being proactive and you've for lack of the better words, you grab the bull by the horns and you just kind of take control over any situation, and you've just kind of adapted to that mindset and that lifestyle, it's way easier than being reactive, getting placed in a high stressful situation. And everyone is, say you're in a leadership role at your work and people look at you and they're like, what do we do now? And you're like, I don't know. I think it's just constantly being proactive in everything. It carries forward more. It kind of gives you that leader mindset too. So say you're in a scenario and you get placed there and you had a complete game plan, right? This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. And now that scenario takes a curveball. How do you handle that? How do you adapt? How do you adjust? Do you let your emotions take over based off of the high level of stress, based off the fact that it's not on your game plan, that it's not a part of your agenda, and you have to adapt accordingly? Do you just say, oh, I'm adapting now. I'm moving forward. I'm being proactive with these changes. I'm not allowing them to affect me. Or are you reactive, where that stress level builds up and you don't know what to do? You kind of get into a fight or flight stage where you just freeze and you panic and you don't make as good as decisions as you normally would, because you haven't adapted to that proactive lifestyle that you normally would do.
I think in that situation, you're kind of talking a couple of different things. I mean, you're talking about having to react. So when a circumstance changes or a stressor comes up in life, you still have to be reactive. And, so there's nothing proactive about that scenario. The difference is that you have prepared yourself spiritually, physically, intellectually, emotionally, socially to respond to more difficult situations as they come up. And so when we look at the role of exercise, why we adapt in exercise is because we have put a stress on our body in preparation for the next stress. And so your adaptation is going to be to make you a little bit better responsive to those stressors. Like I'll often use as an example in my classes with the fight or flight response that a number of years ago I was at a conference, and it was in kind of it was definitely an unfamiliar area. The hotel was not in the nicest area of town, and so I had to kind of walk through an area where you could perceive it to be maybe a little bit more dangerous than it was, or maybe it was, really actually was. But you had to walk through an area you're unfamiliar with, and you had to kind of be a little bit on guard, right? And so as I'm walking, it's early in the morning, I hear somebody running behind me. And, immediately I kind of went into that fight or flight response where I don't know what the situation's going to bring. You kind of tense up a little bit. Your heart rate goes up a little bit. Your muscles tense up, and you start shifting blood flow into the skeletal muscles. And then out of the corner of my eye, I see this guy about half my size running up, carrying a couple little grocery bags, just running to wherever he's going. And I had to kind of laugh to myself that, oh my God, I can't believe I had that fight or flight response over something that was so insignificant. But how I use it as an example is, well, what if I turned around and it's Dwayne Johnson wielding a knife at me? Now it becomes a much more stressful situation where, yeah, now I'm going to have to choose between fight or flight. And so when our bodies are proactively prepared for the stressors that come through life, we are going to have a less of a catecholamine response, less epinephrine, norepinephrine being dumped into our system, or, some might be more familiar with adrenaline, that adrenaline rush. And so as we respond to what might be a stressful situation, we have a minimal hormonal response to a potential threat. And if that threat is less than it was, then the response just subsides. If it's greater, we have a capacity then to elevate that response without causing harm to the body. Now, if I was really out of shape, had high blood pressure, heart condition, all those kind of things, and I turned around and it was a much more significant threat, I'd be more susceptible to having a heart attack. So we being proactive and reactive is the best kind of approach. We have to prepare ourselves for the situations where we need to be reactive, and because we're always going to have to be reactive. There are always changes, there are always uncertainties in life that are going to cause us to respond. And so it's not a matter of being proactive or reactive. It's a matter of how are we going to be reactive when we are called upon? Or in general, are we just relying on our reactive response rather than being proactive?
That kind of ties in with number 5, reducing stress. Being proactive can reduce stress because you are not constantly playing catch up. You can anticipate problems and take actions to prevent them, reducing the likelihood of stress inducing events.
Again, I don't always like the way we talk about stress, because we're always going to have stress, and stress is either going to be, there's typically positive stress, negative stress, and eustress, stress that is just kind of not neither positive nor negative. Exercise is a stress. I don't want to avoid the stress of exercise. But when it comes to situations where we are going to have stress, things that are going to push our limits a little bit, we want to be able to approach those positively, look at it as a positive. That's that kind of gratitude check, gratitude with the 2 T's that I've talked about. It's not allowing ourselves to be overwhelmed by the challenges in life. Because as Forrest Gump said, it happens, right? And
It happens.
when it happens, we got to be able to respond to it. And so it's not a matter of reducing the stress in our lives. It's having a greater capacity to respond to that stress in a favorable manner. Thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think you're right. I think I think that kind of ties into what the next portion is. So the next portion are a few examples on reactive versus proactive. Reactive would be you're waiting until the last minute to complete the project. Proactive is you're starting a project early and breaking it down into manageable tasks. And it kind of goes hand in hand with what you're talking about. So if you're proactive and say you're taking on a big project, or you're taking on a lifestyle change, or you're paying off a credit card debt, if you're proactive about it and you break it off into little tiny pieces instead of trying to pay it all or trying to do it all or trying to wait until the last minute where you become so overwhelmed and you really have no one else to blame but yourself because you put that extra pressure on you, when if you didn't wait until the last minute, if you would have just been proactive, if you would have planned accordingly, it doesn't seem as overwhelming, and it's something that you could easily just kind of take control over. But unfortunately, there are individuals out there that do wait until the last minute and they do become super, super overwhelmed. So I think having that proactive mindset of Okay, I got this project that I need to get done. Okay, I have this task that I need to get done. Okay, I have this wedding that I'm planning for. Breaking it down piece by piece by piece and just giving yourself tasks, whether it's daily task, hourly task, weekly task, and just saying, hey, I got to get this done by this time frame, or I got to get this done by this day. When the actual deadline of whatever event or whatever task or whatever it is that you need to finally accomplish, when it's right around the corner, you're not as overwhelmed because you've broken it down bit by bit. So you don't have that response to your body where, you know, in the past, I used to wait till the last minute all the time. I really did. I used to wait until the last minute. I was not proactive at all. And everything just became super overwhelming. And that is not the way to live.
I don't think that is either proactive or reactive. I think it's a completely different topic. So that point, I think, kind of an odd number, because you're not being proactive if you're given a task. You're having to respond to the task. So proactive would be, again, like if you're looking at college, being proactive is, okay, I know in this class that the professor is going to assign me a essay exam. So I'm going to start on it before the class even starts. That I might call proactive. But once you say, okay, hey, you have this assignment and it's due in so many weeks, now you're being reactive. And so are you going to procrastinate and delay getting that task accomplished? Or are you going to get acting on it immediately and break it into some chunks that's going to make it more manageable as you approach that due date? And so when you talk about somebody, paying off a debt, the proactive approach would be not to get in that debt in the first place. So you anticipate you are going to need a new car at some point, or you're buying a house. You don't wait until the last minute and then say, oh, well, I don't have any money for down payment, so I'm going to have to borrow 100% of the value of the car. A proactive person would begin to save early. And so financially, if we want to call ourselves proactive rather than reactive, we are saving for the things that we know eventually we want to get, or the things that we want to get. And so we delay that gratification. You want a new TV, you don't go out immediately and buy it on credit. That's reactive. Even though you say, okay, well, I'm budgeting that, it's still reactive, and it's not the way to go. The better way is to be, truly proactive and plan ahead for the things that that can ultimately cause stress in your lives. And so I wouldn't call that proactive versus reactive. I would say, you're dealing with that procrastination piece of it, and there are times when we want to procrastinate. And that's a kind of positive procrastination where we put off something that we don't need to do right now so that we can do the things that we need to do.
All right. Well, what about in this department, as far as health goes? Reactive would be ignoring a health problem until it becomes super serious. Proactive is getting regular checkups and taking preventative measures.
Again, when you're talking health, being healthy is proactive. Doing the things that are going to minimize your risks of having health issues is being proactive. But again, it's going to happen. Or I'm just going to say, shit's going to happen. You're going to get sick at times. And especially as we age, no matter how well we try to manage the aging process and how well we attempt to age, stuff can still happen. We don't have, necessarily control over how the environment might be affecting our bodies. People get cancer all the time that are very healthy. People get heart disease that have lived pretty active, healthy lives because they have certain family histories and things that, or maybe even a congenital defect or something like that just makes it more inevitable. But it's that preparation piece for doing the things that are going to help us to be healthy, to avoid disease, not smoking, exercising regularly, getting regular physical activity, eating a healthy diet, getting proper rest, having at bedtime, getting an adequate amount of sleep. Those are the things that are just simply proactive living that are going to keep you healthy. But when healthy situations arise, how do you manage or deal with those? The person who is overall reactive in their life and not caring about the future, not aging well, is going to be that person that is constantly then having to deal with the immediacy and urgencies of the situations in their lives.
I think that's well said. So, how can we be proactive instead of reactive in a work environment? I'm not going to read every single one. I'm not going to break it all down, but it's basically everything that we kind of have talked about. This article in particular, it's advising us to set clear goals, prioritize our task, anticipate problems, take initiative, and communicate effectively. And I do kind of want to talk about communicating effectively. I think effective communication is essential if you want to be proactive. It means, well, and what this article is saying is by communicating effectively, it means that you're keeping your colleagues and superiors informed about what you're doing and what you need from them. This allows you to work collaboratively and stay ahead of the curve. I think it's also, keeping that lines of communication open, especially with either your boss or your hierarchy, and you say, hey, I'm going to get you this. I'm going to get this task done for you and I'll have it to you by, and you set that date. Now that you're verbalizing it and you're telling it to that individual, you're kind of putting that little extra pressure on yourself to get it done and to prioritize it. And that's just, for me, that's kind of a little trick I use to goal set for myself. But then on top of that, if you don't get something done, or if they ask you to get something done, you can say, hey, actually, I was wondering if I could get an extension on that because of all these other tasks that I have going on. And you're just keeping that line of communication open.
Okay, if you are in a work situation where you're going to not be able to complete a task when it was supposed to be done, you're not being proactive. Again, going back to that prioritizing our time, looking at the urgency and the importance of things, at the forefront of that, if your superior comes to you and says, I need you to do this particular task, and you have a list of other tasks that need to be done, and you look at that list of tasks and say, okay, well, these are all of higher priority to that, so I'm going to have to get these done before I can even get to that. Maybe then your proper communication would be to go back to your boss and say, well, I can't do that because I have these other priorities.
I think we're saying the same thing on this one.
Well, not really, because you said, you didn't get it done on time and you're going to have to, I need an extension. Well, you shouldn't ever have to ask for an extension. You either have to ask for a different plan or I need help getting these other things done. If this is things get done. And sometimes, your personal priorities aren't always going to match with your superior's priorities.
Right.
And in those situations, then, you have to consider, well, what is more important to me, this job or family or my health or these other things? And, it might be a case where this is not the right work environment for me because, they're putting demands on me that I'm either not willing or not capable of accomplishing. I don't think, in a work environment that people are always as considerate about your priorities, your needs, your welfare than they are for their own. And so even having communication open, sometimes communicating can be a detriment in the workplace. Trust me, I work in academia. I could give countless examples. But you can be proactive and, deal with your own situations and, manage the things that you need to get done in a healthy way so that you're meeting your appropriate deadlines and those types of things.
Well, I mean, and you kind of bring up a good point, right? Because when you get hired on to do something, you get hired on to do that job. People, and by people I mean like your superiors or the agency that you're working for. They didn't hire you to take time off to be sick. They didn't hire you to call in late because you got stuck in traffic. They didn't hire you to miss work because you have to go to a school recital, right? They hired you to do a job. And yes, we're humans, and yes, we live lives outside of the work, but you're kind of bringing up a good point is, people don't really care about your excuses. You get paid to do a job, you got to show up to do that job, and you're kind of expected to be the best version of yourself at that job that you get paid to do. Realistically speaking, we live in a world where there are individuals that may not be the best version of themselves in that professional environment. But again, it kind of comes back to the fact that you get hired to do a job and you're expected to do that job. So maybe that form of communication needs to be with yourself of, this is not right. This is not the job for me. And I need to be at a place where it's going to be more beneficial for what I have going on outside of work. Does that make sense of what I'm saying at all? Or
Yeah, and again, if you're going to talk about being proactive, where it becomes, being a proactive individual is making those considerations as you enter into that work scenario. If I'm applying for a job, I know what the responsibilities are. This is what I need to be doing. And then once you've accepted those responsibilities, then again, it doesn't mean that you should be sacrificing higher priorities in your life, like family, relationships, and all those types of things should not come at the cost of your job. But when you have a job that's got a certain amount of responsibility, then you have to take into account, that opportunity cost. I have this 24-hour day. I have to get these things done for my work. What are these other things that I am attempting to prioritize above my work and above my social responsibilities and things like that I need to remove from my list? And I think in most situations, everybody should be able to do that. We waste a significant amount of time in our life, and it might come down to, in a week's span, if I have one particular week, like if you're a tax accountant right now, a tax accountant, we're recording this on April 15th, which is technically tax day, but I think Monday taxes are due. This past week has probably been the most stressful, the most the most busiest time for somebody who is a tax accountant. Next week will probably be a little bit lighter for them. But for this given week, they're going to know ahead of time, if they're being proactive, that they're going to have a lot of work to do. So it's probably not the best week to be scheduling a lot of other activities. Exercise might have to go by the wayside a little bit. If your kid has a recital at school, that's a priority. What am I going to give up to be able to do that and accomplish the work that I need to be doing? That's what being proactive is. And I think when we talk about aging well, it's learning to prioritize the most important things when they are important, trying to limit that urgency. And going back to the grid that you talked about, most of what we are doing through the day should be important, but not necessarily urgent. We don't want to be pushing everything to a point of everything has to be urgent, because that's when we cause stress for ourselves. That's when we become reactive. And if we are living in that quadrant where everything is important and urgent, then we have to reevaluate our life at that point.
And then I think the last thing that they have in this article says, what does being financially proactive mean? And they basically, I'm just going to kind of summarize it real quick. Being financially proactive means taking control of your finances and making informed decisions about your money. It means actively managing your income, expenses, investments, rather than just reacting to financial events as they happen. To be financially proactive, you need to understand your financial situations clearly. This means knowing how much money you make, how much you spend, and how much money goes. It also means understanding your debt, credit scores, savings, and investments. In conclusion, ultimately, being financially proactive is about taking control of your financial future and making intelligent decisions about your money. Being proactive, you can build wealth, achieve your financial goals, and create a more secure financial future for yourself and your family. I feel like that's also pretty self-explanatory, though.
Yeah, that's about as common sense as you can be. Unfortunately, most people they lack that common sense. But it's also it's more of a sense of kind of responsibility, a sense of self-control. A lot of people don't have self-control, and that's why they have to be reactive financially. You just have to plan, budget. I mean, that's what a budget is knowing I have this much money coming in and this is how much I can spend. And it's like our government, we talk, the government's budget on a regular basis. That is the most reactive, not even reactive. It's just the most pathetic approach to finances. And no wonder people in this country are, in debt and struggling financially. It's because our own government and our own educational systems don't even understand how to prepare themselves proactively for the future. We tend to live our finances reactively. We wait until the car breaks down to have maybe money in an account for repairs. We should be following different principles where at the beginning of every month or at every pay period, we are basically putting money into whether physical envelopes or virtual envelopes of money to say, okay, this is my money that's going to my rent or my mortgage. This is the money that's going into my food budget. And, people are struggling right now because food prices have gone up dramatically. And we don't have the wiggle room in our budgets to be able to account for those emergency situations and when food is higher. We have to have a clothing budget. You just need to put that money aside. And if you spend $2,000 a year on clothes, well, you don't wait until you need those $2,000 worth of clothing items. Throughout the month, you have 12 months. And if you divide that, I should have given a number that's a little bit easier to divide into by 12, but pull out my calculator quickly here. And if I said I have $2,000 for clothing, then I should be setting aside about $167 a month in a budget that when it comes time to buy clothes, that money is available. So that's being proactive. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to end up building wealth, because in some situations, depending on your income, you're barely scraping by, but you're not digging yourself into a deeper hole by reacting every time something comes up or every time you need to make a purchase and then you're putting it on a credit card that's got high interest rates.
I think one of my best moves, I told you one of my old roommates was a banker. And I think after graduating college, I know I was really struggling financially. I was living paycheck to paycheck. And then I ended up having like a really, really bad breakup, and I got into some debt because of that. And then I moved in with this gentleman who was a banker, and he kind of sat down with me, and he just it was kind of a trade-off, really. So, I was doing personal training at the time, so I helped him physically, and he was doing banking at the time, so he helped me fiscally, and we just kind of broke everything down. And honestly, it was having someone break things down, because I know you can read articles and I know it seems like it's common sense, but when you're in that situation where you're like, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming. This is like, how am I supposed to do this? And just having someone really, really break it down and say, hey, you can do this. You're not as bad as you think you are. It's just a little tiny tweaks here and there, and it adds up really quickly, and you can pull yourself out of this. And sure enough, like the advice that he gave me, it definitely helped out significantly. Now I have a really good chunk of change for a savings account, saving up for a house. I have money for vacations. I'm feeling very blessed. We'll say that. Very blessed.
Yeah, and again, it's just being proactive.
Yeah, and it is. It's just being proactive. And like I said, I just changed my mindset as when I got paid, I just was paying my future self. I just included it as if it was a bill. Oh, this is just a bill I'm going to do. And that bill was my future, right? This is for my future self. I'm making that investment now.
Okay, so the article that you presented seems to be focused more on financial reactivity. What about how do we become proactive and age well?
Well, I think we still use the same concepts, right? So I think we use the same concepts as far as setting a goal. I think like you have a goal of, and you have many goals too, right? What's your goal? You have that goal of being a person in your age bracket to lift. What's your goal that you always talk about it? Lift is more than anyone else in your age bracket,
Well, it's
right?
not just lift. I mean, to me, it's there's multiple goals that come along with aging well, and so I think the first thing that we have to define if we want to be proactive and aging well is what is aging well to us. What do we want to be when we're older? And I turn 60 here in a couple weeks, and this will probably actually air after I'm 60. But for me, 60 isn't old. I'm looking the next 20, 30, 40 years down the line. What do I want to be? That's aging well to me. I could
Right.
say I'm aging well now, but what am I doing to age well tomorrow? That saying, be your best today, be better tomorrow. To me, aging well should be, and of course, I'm not going to be necessarily better physically and in overall better health or performance as I get older from this point than I was when I was younger. But relative to the norms, to me, that's aging well. So I want to be increasingly separated from my peers as I age. And so, somebody might say, well, you look great for your age right now, but 10 years from now, if I haven't changed that much from where I am now, I look really, really great for my age. And then it separates even further. I think I've mentioned to my students a lot that one of my goals in life, and this is kind of how I define aging well, is my high school, with the exception of our COVID year, so we missed our last reunion, but we have reunions every 5 years. And my goal is somewhat tongue in cheek, but it's also, and it's not like a vanity goal, but my goal is to go back to each of those reunions in proportionally better shape than everyone else. So that they're seeing that separation every 5 years. That is, people are naturally declining or declining faster than what would really be natural because of poor behavior, poor health. And I got to be honest, it's not that easy because I do have a lot of my peers that are, staying in pretty good health and condition. And so I appreciate when that challenge becomes more difficult and maybe it becomes a bit more competitive. But ideally, as we are aging well, we should be seeing greater and greater separation as we age from our peers. And so when we look at the goals associated with aging well, it's not just one simple goal. And I do have, certain weight training goals, body composition goals and those types of things. And, for example, I had the goal of wanting to really deadlift about 450 pounds by my 60th birthday. I've actually exceeded that. And so now I'm pushing to, and this is a trap bar deadlift. I want to hit 500 by the end of this month. And
Wow.
I pulled 480 on Wednesday. And I don't know why, some reason when I'm at the wrestling strength and conditioning, I can actually pull a little bit more. But I'm close. 2 weeks ago, I did 460, which surprised the heck out of me. and pulled 480 this week. And so it's like, okay, I think I could hit the 500 by the end of the month. Now it's going to be, that's a high bar, the high grip trap bar deadlift. So some might argue that's not a true deadlift, and it's definitely not. And I know I can't pull near that weight on a straight bar deadlift, but I'll take what I can take. And for my body structure and my age, I'm pretty good. I feel pretty good with that. But it's having those, but okay, you have a goal, whether it's physical, spiritual, intellectual, emotional, social, whatever it might be, for aging well. You have to have a plan in place to get you there. And so that's what being proactive and aging proactively is going to entail, is knowing where you want to go, but also how you want to get there. And without a goal, without a vision, you can't be proactive. You're always going to be reactive.
Well, and I think that's it. Set a clear goal and then prioritize the task in order to get that goal. So what are you going to do to prioritize hitting that 500 plus deadlift, right? You gotta train accordingly. You gotta eat accordingly. You have to go on your sleep schedule. You set that bedtime. All of this helps age an individual well. You probably also take the proper steps in order to manage your stress levels too, because if you're going to go in to a gym and you're going to hit a PR, especially over 500 pounds in a deadlift, whether it's a high bar trap dead or if it's an actual standard from the floor deadlift, you still have to go in with a mindset of, I'm going to kill this. This PR, I'm making this happen, and I'm making it happen today. And if your stress levels are off the chart, or you're just not mentally in it, or you're dealing with something else, you're not going to go in with the same mindset. You're just like, I guess I'll do this, and it doesn't have the same effect. So setting that goal and then prioritizing what you need to do in order to hit that goal, I think that goes hand in glove with proactiveness and being proactive.
But again, with you talk about stress levels, you can't control your stress levels. There's not a lot that we can do in life that can necessarily affect our stress. We can affect our stress response, and that's the key. And that's where you become proactive so that you can be reactive. And so, what am I doing to control my stress response? I'm getting to bed earlier. I'm trying to get sleep. I don't let stress build up, probably to detriment sometimes socially, because I'll let my emotions out. I don't let them bottle up inside of me. So sometimes, it might come across as road rage and those types of things. But the reality is it's just kind of, letting those stress out, not letting it build up, but, eating right and not doing the negative things that are going to give stress a foothold in my life. You're going to have stress. I mean, especially as you age. I mean, stress doesn't go away. It just, how we deal with it is how we are able to age well in response to stress.
Well, and a lot of people don't have that ability that you have, to where, oh, I'm just going to let it out really quick and then, okay, I'm over it. Some people, they do hold on to it. Some people, whether it's in a professional work setting and they're getting ripped on by either a customer or a peer or a superior, and they try and keep that level of professionalness, so they swallow their own emotions and react accordingly. Or maybe it's in a relationship scenario where it could be a toxic relationship, or maybe it's in a parenting dynamic where it's a parent and a child, and the child does something that the parent disagrees with, and so now that parent is going through the process of internalizing it and processing it, and whatever the case may be. Not everyone has the ability to easily let things go. Some people really, really hold on to it. Now, I like what you discussed a couple podcasts ago. I think you called it like Haval, just it's missed, just let it go. And I do think that there is a huge spiritual aspect as far as being proactive and recognizing I have a hard time letting things go. I let things get to me, and I let this build up, and it has an effect on my body. And having that understanding of, you know what, it's out of my control, it's beyond my control. I'm just going to let it go. I think that is a proactive step. If you can recognize that your stress levels get to a point where it hinders your ability to function throughout the day, being proactive, and whether you're going down a spiritual approach and you're giving it to God, or you're taking that mental aspect of, this is a problem that I have and I need to make that own change, you're still being proactive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but everybody has that ability. You choose whether or not to act on that ability. And so to say I don't have that ability, is reactive, and it is also just full of excuses. It's okay, yeah, and maybe in a situation you can't just let out, verbally your feelings or your emotions, but you can control those emotions. You can remove yourself from that situation and do something that will let out the stress, or alleviate that stress response. Or you can do things that, if you're in a situation with a occupation or work where there's a lot of stress involved with that, you're in customer service and you're dealing with Karens all the time that are just, screaming and hollering at you, you can change your mindset to be able to just respond to them in a favorable manner. You can't necessarily blurt out what you'd want to say to that person, but you could kind of, you have the option. You can either allow that stress to overwhelm you and consume you and just eat you up from inside. You can let it out and lose your job, or you can find that third way, or how do I manage this person so that I'm letting out that stress, but they're not having the control over me. And that's what we have to do in order to age well.
Well said. Yeah, well said.
So what other areas do we need to control as we begin to wrap this up, as we look at aging well? And we can take a proactive approach to our health. We can, our diet, bedtime, whether or not we smoke, don't smoke, what our body composition is. And I think that's another area where, people become very reactive. They don't look at their diet until they decide, well, I'm going to the beach this summer and I'm overweight. I need to get into my bathing suit, my beach fitness level, so I look better at the beach. Or they wait until the doctor says, "Hey, look, your blood pressure is through the roof, your triglycerides are high, your cholesterol is high. You need to do something about your diet and your weight." So being proactive in that regard and trying to just overall manage a healthy body composition is a better proactive response. Don't wait until your muscles atrophy to begin to try and build and maintain muscle mass and strength.
Right.
Your cardiovascular health, we can maintain that, as opposed to, oh, now, doctor says I got heart disease, I got to start exercising. Start doing this stuff before it has to become reactive. And, from a spiritual standpoint, what are we doing to kind of unify ourselves better with the universe and with, our neighbors, our communities, and things like that? What am I doing to recognize that I am not the center of the universe, and that there is this interconnectedness, among us? So what are we doing? And that might, be what am I reading? Am I journaling? And taking on those things early rather than waiting until it's too late. Emotionally, if we are finding ourselves exploding a bit more as we drive to work, I need to get my water bottle back in the car to practice my Haval, where people drive like idiots, which they seem to be doing much more lately. I just squirt my little bottle and just say Haval. It's not affecting me. I'm just going to keep going where I have to go. One thing that helps me is using cruise control on the highway. Going to maintain a reasonable speed. If I have to pass people, I have to pass people, but I'm going to let people pass me I'm going to try and drive in the middle lane as much as I can so people can pass me, and not get all bent out of shape of the people that are going, 55 in the passing lane when the speed limit is 65. And then you have, your relationships. What are you doing proactively to benefit your relationships? And, my wife and I think could do a little bit better with our 15-minute check-in that we've established. We've been doing it for years now. And sometimes it gets a little routine and you just have to check, okay, are we getting too routine with some of these things that we have made habits as opposed to growth focused behaviors? You look at intellectually, what am I doing to improve the information that I have available to me, my knowledge base and things like that? What other areas do you consider to be important as we age well?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing is just nutrition.
The biggest thing for aging well?
I really do. I think the biggest thing for aging well is nutrition and what we are putting into our body and what we're fueling our body with. I really think that's one of the biggest things. I think anyone can work out. I think anyone can put themselves on a sleep schedule, but I think the proper level of nutrition that we're putting inside of our body to help with muscle recovery, to help with our sleep cycles, to help with just health, not putting things that are going to spike cancerous things. I don't know. The point is, I just think don't give in to cravings. Be proactive, not reactive. You had a stressful day at work. You want to have a craving. Probably stick to that diet. You had a stressful day at work. You want to have a few shots of whiskey to relieve the pain. You should probably focus on your diet. Focus on the goals. Go to the gym instead. Burn off whatever hectic scenario that you have there. I just think all in all, every single person, they need to have that goal. They need to know that, like you said, it's Haval. It's the mist. It's irrelevant. No matter what craziness comes to you, don't be reactive towards it. And if you are going to be reactive, react in a way that it follows those guidelines that you've already established and that you've already set in place by being proactive to get there.
So again, what's more important? I mean, diet, many people cannot control their diet to any great extent. They might be able to manage how much they intake, but there's a significant amount of our population living in food deserts or in poverty situations where they just can't afford good, healthy food. And so if that is the priority, if that's the main thing that's going to help them to age well, then they're screwed. So what do you say to that person if you say that diet is the most important component of aging well, and they say, well, I have no control over it. I can't do that. So I can't possibly age well. I think probably a more top priority is that nature of kind of that Haval attitude or that attitude of gratitude, where we realize that the things that we are chasing after in life are in the end not all that important. And so building as much of a legacy as we can, doing the best that we can with what we're given, and kind of prioritizing relationships and other centeredness, to me, is a much more important priority for aging well than whether I'm eating well, whether I hit my weight training goal before I hit 60, all those types of things. I mean, I think it's, how we are impacting others and how we impact our world is probably the most important thing that we should be proactive about as we attempt to age well.
Would you also throw in a social aspect to it?
That's all inclusive in that.
Okay.
I mean, you can't have healthy relationships without having a sense of prioritizing others first. And so that, it all falls under that same category and description that I just talked about. So when I look at my well-centered fitness, I consider that the spiritual and physical are probably, I think of it as more of an ever-expanding triangle or pyramid, although I don't always like the pyramid type of shape to things because it tends to make others seem like they're lesser importance, where that social is really at the pinnacle. But if I'm not, the pinnacle should be good, healthy social relationships. But in order for that to happen, I have to be spiritually minded. I have to take care of the physical. I have to have some level of intellectual development so that I can contribute to relationships and to, interactions with people. I have to be emotionally well-centered in order to really achieve those healthy long-term relationships. And when the other components kind of fall out of kilter, then our social well-being tends to suffer as well.
All right. I think that sums up everything so far.
All right. So stop listening to this podcast and be proactive and go age well. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.